What motivated you to join the Air Force over a different branch of the military?
Well, I got to be honest with you. Originally, I didn't know what a combat controller was or what they did or anything like that. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL originally. That was my first job that I looked into. And I was fighting MMA amateur. I was a 19-year-old kid and couldn't really make money, doing that. I was doing construction jobs, working hard. So that movie, Act of Valor, came out, and it was like a recruitment movie for Navy SEALs. I saw that. Wow, that looks really, really cool. I want to do what they do. So I actually ended up talking to a Navy recruiter, and he was kind of yanking me around. He really wasn't giving me any specific job in the military. He wouldn't, for some reason, he didn't want to give me like a SEAL contract. So I was like, all right. He wanted to be go in for this, and then you can cross train. And I was like, I don't like that. So went across the hall, talked to the Air Force recruiter, and he really sold me. He actually originally wanted me to become a pararescue. It was a PJ that most people know in the Air Force, and so I started actually training for that job. When I took my pass test to become a PJ, there was no slots at the time. There was a slot for combat controller, and I did really well on my test. I took some kid didn't make it, so I took his slot, and that's how it became. I had no idea what a combat controller did when I joined the Air Force. I just knew it was special operations. I knew they jumped out of planes. I knew they scuba dived. I know they did everything a Navy SEAL did. I had no idea what an air traffic controller was, but I'm pretty glad I ended up into that community and that career field at the end of the day.
And that's a perfect setup because my very next question is going to be once you become a combat controller or you go for that path, what are your responsibilities? Is it a direct action unit? Is it a support unit in the special operations? Like, what is a combat controller doing in the field?
So a combat controller, what we're known for today is mostly for attaching to special forces teams, Green Berets and ODAs, and Navy SEAL teams, and we're going to be the JTAC attached to that special forces team. So they mean that anything a special forces team, direct action, um, any sort of missions like that. But we also have additional jobs that we do as combat controllers. We are ATC certified. So a lot of times when we're deployed, we're running airfields, a FARP, which is a forward air refueling point. So if they're hitting an objective, they usually have an airfield that's offset like 30 or so miles. That's pretty close, so they can do refueling or bring if you have a medevac, bring a medevac there to get them on a C-130 and get them out of there. So we're doing a lot of ATC, anything to do with air to ground interface, really. So talking to ISR platforms, talking to like I said, medevacs, talking to AC-130 gunships, fast movers, anything to do with air to ground. We kind of can fit in on any team. So and additionally, we have to be able to survey airfields. So you can't just bring in a C-130 on some random road. You got to make sure you have to be able to test the density of the soil, make sure it has the right dimensions, width, length, size. So there's a lot of definitely little tasks we have to learn. But it just they would kind of call combat controllers the jacks of all trades because you got a little bit of everything.
So if you see something in the movies where like some guys they're maybe pinned down and they're calling in for air support and there's a guy getting on a radio and he's calling out coordinates over the radio of what to bring in, is that something you would be doing?
100%. Yeah, that's a combat controller, especially if it's on a soft team. It's like that. We were kind of mad about that 12 Strong movie that came out. They didn't mention a combat controller at all. When in reality, their combat controller did most of that mission, calling in all those airstrikes. But yeah, I mean that's exactly what a combat controller does. We're calling in close air support. That's a big part of the mission, and that's how you get attached to like Delta or a SEAL team, something like that. That's where you're going to be in that sort of mission.
And let me rewind this a little bit now that we've laid it out for the viewer what your job responsibility is. I want to go back to the training. How rigorous
Mm-hmm.
and grueling of training do combat controllers face? Everyone hears about buds. We know the
Yeah,
Army Rangers, and then obviously there's Delta selection, which is shrouded in secrecy, right? But
yeah.
what's the training for a combat controller look like?
So for me, it took 2.5 years. It's a 2.5 year pipeline. So it's very rigorous. I mean, we have our own dive school that was modeled after the Army dive school, which is a very challenging school. We have we have to do Halo. We have a selection process initially, and it's like, I mean, we have like the little man syndrome because we're Air Force guys. Everybody makes fun of the Air Force. So like when we get attached to a SEAL team or we get attached to a special forces, we need to make sure we're on their level with everything. So we kind of overcompensate. I feel like since like we're attaching, our instructors are super super hard on us, making sure like when we show up the team, yeah, we can move with the team, we can shoot with the team, we can definitely keep up physically with the team. So I mean, it was a challenge. It's super challenging for me. I mean, you could take our guys, you could put them with anybody, and we're gonna, if not outperform them, honestly, we're gonna be the top of the pack. I mean, every school I went to that wasn't an Air Force school, I mean, I was always at the top of the pack for everything. Mountain warfare school, whatever it was. I went to a lot of Army schools that I kept up or did better than most of the guys in those schools.
I love that. That is so incredibly awesome. I just heard you mention something about halo jumping.
Yep.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the viewers who might not know what that is, that's a high altitude, low opening jump. You're jumping out of an airplane, correct?
Yep. Yeah,
And when
absolutely. Yeah.
how high are you jumping from when you're halo jumping?
So I mean, obviously it depends on what we're doing. So usually actually if operationally we're not haloing, we're hey-hoing, which is high altitude, high opening. So that would, you're jumping from anywhere from 18 plus on oxygen, jumping from super high. You hop out, pop because hop and pop. So you just hop out, pop the parachute right away, and then you fly together with your team down to the objective. So yeah, some of those you're jumping real high, and you're doing like 40K offsets or 30K. I think the biggest one I did was like a 30 something K offset in training. It wasn't alive, but it was like, I mean, that's pretty far. I mean, that's a long distance to be flying together with a team all the way to the your place where you're landing. So
What was going through your mind the first time you jumped out of an airplane at that altitude?
I wouldn't say that stuff wasn't that bad to me because you're on oxygen and you're jumping at high. So the higher you are, the more time you have something's messed up, the more time you have to fix your problems and figure out what's wrong with you. The scariest jump I had was probably at Army Free Fall School. When I went through, they've changed. They since changed it. We weren't allowed to jump with NVGs at night, so you had no night vision goggles when you did your night jumps. And like our whole thing about everything in the military, right? If you're gonna be able to do it, you have to do it at night. We don't usually operate during the days because our enemy can see us during the day, and then we dominate the night because we have NVGs and everything. So night vision goggles. Sorry if I talk in acronyms, I do that a lot.
Yeah.
But so my scariest jump was at Army Free Fall night jump. No NVGs. You're jumping out there with a whole bunch of people that are new jumpers. We're all going to school. You open up the parachute and there's freaking just all you see is like everybody has a chem stick on them, which is a glow stick. You have a red one red one on your front and a green one on your back. So if you have the green in front of you, you're going the right way. If you see a red one, that means somebody's flying towards you and you can't see anything. That was definitely the scariest thing. All I remember jumping out of the plane, just pitch black. I'm just looking at my altimeter the entire time as I fall. Like, just it was so scary. Yeah, that's definitely my scariest jump. But all the high altitude stuff, I mean, they were fun. I had NVGs. I could see what we're doing. We were kind of working together as a team. It was very cold though. It gets really cold at altitude.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you're miles and miles and miles up in the air. So between the dive school, the parachuting, and then the shooting, which was the most challenging for you, and how did you kind of work through that challenge?
So dive school is definitely physically the most challenging school of all of them, I would say, because we have to do, before we even go to dive school, we have to accomplish this thing called pre-scuba, which is 5 weeks of like drown proofing, what they call it. It's basically you do a series of like events we have to accomplish. Like one of them is called underwater, so you just do it underwaters on intervals. So you swim across the pool, touch a crack, come back, do it again. You do that like 5 times. And then the next one you have to do, you tie up your hands behind your back, tie your feet. You have to swim across the pool, then you have to bob. Then you have to go down and grab your mask with your teeth. There's like a lot of these different scenarios. You have to do buddy breathing, which is just you, another guy breathing off a snorkel, but there's an instructor there thrashing you around. This is when you see people getting like shallow water blackout and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you see people passing out every single day in the pool. So just to accomplish that, I mean, and the thing is, like, this is like we do this training like a year and a half after they already put me through air traffic control school. They put me through combat control school. They put me through airborne. They put me through Halo. So this is one of like the last things that we had to do. And then we go to dive school. and guys were still quitting. So you know what I mean? Like you spend like all this time invested in trying to become a combat controller, accomplishing super hard stuff, and then you know they put you in the pool and they drown you, and you still have to make it. So that was definitely the most physical. I actually watched back at dive school on this test called One Man's, which is they bring you down and they bring you in the pool and they put a blacked out mask on you so you can't see anything, and they're just thrashing you around, taking your hoses and your regulators, and they're tying into the knot behind your back, and then you have to get to your razor, untie the knots, get to your regulator, breathe, and it's like a 10 to 15-minute test. I'm not even sure how long it was, but the whole time you're just getting beat up in the pool. And then eventually there's this one knot where they put it's called the whammy knot, and then you get to the whammy knot, and you're unable to recover that. So if you have to know by feel that that knot is unrecoverable, and then you ditch your gear, and then you breathe off your regulator off your underwater, and then that's like the test is done. And then so sometimes you tying a knot, you think it's the whammy knot, but it's not, and then you ditched it, and then you pre-ditched and you fail. So that's what happened to me. So then I had to go all the way back to preschool, do another 5 weeks of preschool, then go through dive school again. So I definitely say that was the most challenging of all my schools.
That is mind-boggling. I feel my heart rate going up just listening to you talk about being there. Now, I know you went to Afghanistan in 2018, correct?
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit. When you were told that you were going to deploy to Afghanistan, what kind of thoughts were flowing through your head? And what's the state of Afghanistan at this point in time?
So this point in time, I was in an interesting time. So Trump just took office. So it was a change of command. So, but there was definitely rules, and the missions, the special forces teams that were out there, excuse me, were going on. They're pushing out more so than they had been before that. Not to say that people weren't doing stuff for the last, 20 years. It was been 18 years since 9/11, right? But we started actually, doing a lot in that time frame. So I was excited when I got the news that I was going to be deploying to Afghanistan, just because in the fact that, like, man, I've been training, like I said, I did 2.5 years of the pipeline, put myself through hell. You know what I mean? I wanted to go use these skills that I put everything into, to become a combat controller. I wanted to go there and actually do the mission. So I was kind of excited to go out there and do it. But then also, like, when I got there and you see how things, you anticipate things to be a certain way, and then when you get there, and it's different, if that makes sense. And even as much as I thought I would be mentally prepared for everything, but when I got there, it was just, the emotions and everything that kind of came with it was different than what I expected. So, but it was good. I mean, I thought I learned so much about myself. I learned what the world's really like. I learned there's things that we don't know that's going on. So it's like it was a good experience for me overall. I'm so happy I did it and got to experience it.
What were some of the things that kind of surprised you the most versus expectations going in?
It is, and then you hear it now, but it didn't really resonate with me before. But like the fact that it's not black and white who you're fighting, you know what I mean? It's not like you kind of hear people talk about that, like you don't know, like it's like I remember my instructors even saying that, and like you're fighting against people who are Taliban, and but they're like 15-year-old kids, you know what I mean? Or like it's this stuff that's like it's not so black and white and who you're fighting over there. And I think that's the things that I saw mostly. But and it was just the like the amount of like it's you either you're doing something that's like your life and death experience, or you're doing nothing at all, and you're just hanging around waiting for something to do. So it's just like the highs and lows. It's like a week, 2 weeks of doing nothing, trying to find things, to playing cards, just trying to find things to keep you freaking from going crazy from boredom. And then there's like 2 days or 3 days you don't sleep at all, and you're just doing something intense. You know what I mean? So I thought it was just interesting. You have to experience to really understand, what it really feels like. But it does make so now that I come back and I watch all these like movies or whatever, or people talking about it, it makes more sense to me now when I come back from it.
Well, let me ask you a question on the movies real quick because you just mentioned it. When you came back from Afghanistan, now you've been deployed, you have all this training, you've been to war, you made it home. When you watch a war movie now that you've been there, is there anything that always sticks out to you that like that is not at all? Like what do they get wrong the most?
It's everything. I mean, it's everything. It's hard for me to even pick out one little thing that they get wrong. Most thing when I see like any movie with gun, guy hiding behind a car and there's bullets going through the car. They're driving away as there's bullets in the car. I'm like, everybody's dead in that car. You know what I mean? Like little things like that I see. So it's really hard for me to distinguish in movies that like it's a lot of fake, but you know, some movies are good. Like the best movie I thought was like Black Hawk Down. I thought they did a phenomenal job with that movie and like the realistic of it. And I just thought that one was really good. But that's also a whole different experience. I didn't even know what it was really like on that mission. You know, what I come from movies is like everybody, you watch these things, but like then you see how it is in real life, and there's no way to replicate what it's like and feeling in a movie. So that's one thing I definitely realized.
I've interviewed, we've had a handful of Black Hawk Down veterans on this show, and they do say the movie, at least from the carnage aspect, captures it perfectly.
Yeah.
They say the actions, the chaos portrayed in the movie is they say is very well done. They have issues with other parts of the movie, but that they get correct. So there you go. Do you have any, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but obviously we're a couple of years now removed. I think we're more than 2 years removed from the pullout. That was 2020, right?
Yeah.
Do you have, as someone who went over there, you know, spent time, blood, sweat, all that stuff with your friends, do you have any thoughts about how it all ended up shaking out when it was said and done?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was like, it would kind of hurt, you know what I mean, seeing that. And it's like I knew almost, but when I was over there, we kind of knew that was going to happen. I remember my captain, the guy that was in charge of me, was like we were just talking one day. He's like, honestly, the way this thing is probably going to pan out, the most highly scenarios are we're going to hand this over back to the Taliban. And I was like, really? Like that doesn't make sense. Like we're still going on missions against the Taliban while we were there, and that's exactly what happened. So I kind of expected that, but it's like even though if I expected it, but when it still happened, I remember definitely feeling a sort of way. And the thing I think that resonates is like, dude, it's like, you know, there's some Afghan army guys that you can't trust, but there was also some really guys that genuinely felt like they were trying to change something in their country to make their country better. And you know what I mean? They believed in that they were going to fight back and take their country back for themselves. And I just know as soon as we got out of there, anybody who trained with the Afghan for the Afghan army or took part, you know, that's it. They're done. They're getting, you know, annihilated. So it's like it's terrible, but like I know that, and I remember because I mean I have a social media presence. I have pictures of me in Afghanistan. I got kids reaching out to me from Afghanistan, like, "Hey, can you help me? Can you help me?" Blah blah blah. And it's just like I feel there's nothing I can do now, especially being removed from the military. And I just remember really feeling a sort of way about how that went down. It was just like I feel like there was better ways we could have done it. I don't know why anytime we'd ever, and I'm not political. I don't really care at all, but like if we're going to, if there's no like why tell people we're getting out of this country and then just slowly retract, and we let the world know that this is what we're doing for some reason. And you know, now the Taliban took over the country in like 3 days or something like that. It was insane. So yeah, definitely felt a sort of way about that. That was a tough thing to happen.
I think a lot of people agree with you, yeah, and it's, you know, I don't get to speak to too many people that were there only a few years, 2 years beforehand. So you kind of got it right on that back end. During your time in Afghanistan, did you ever come across any, you know, tier one elements? Like, who's the most badass group you ever had any experience with during your time in the military?
So I was with an ODA. I got attached with an ODA. So it was my first deployment when I went through Afghanistan. So I only did one deployment. So like so many guys you probably talked to have done 20 deployments, 15 deployments, and so my mission set when I went over there is I was I was running a lot of airfields because I was not a fast mover certified JTAC yet. So the Joint Terminal Air Controller, you have to be as a combat controller. Most of us get certified in that. But since I was my first deployment, when I got on team, I didn't have time to get that training in yet before I deployed. So I went out there to be a AZR, so I controlled the airfields a lot, and I controlled helicopters a lot. I controlled like C-130s a lot, and I did all that. I did all that kind of stuff. So but I got lucky. I helped there's big giant operation they were doing over there, and they needed to do an infill of like 3 different ODAs to go in there to push through this big area. So I did all the air traffic control to bring in all the you know, C-130s, the support, everything we needed. And I was able to hop on the missions, go into missions, and be like the JTAC's like assistant on the mission. So I didn't have to do really anything besides be a gun in the fight and help out the ODAs. But I remember just the guys that were working with the ODAs, they're different than like a lot of guys will go tier one and then come back to the ODAs and be like a team sergeant on the ODAs. And that's what happened with the team I was with, and just their knowledge about watching these guys who've done seven, I don't know how many deployments this guy did and was a tier one operator. It's like watching a really good carpenter do work and you don't know anything about carpenter. You know what I mean? Like somebody with oh, he's got a skill in this. I'm probably watching like a professional fighter who fight. Like he's got a different skill. Like, and that just takes over time of experience and learning that. I remember just watching guys like that, like do their jobs. My first one, I'm kind of new, wide eyed, like this is my first time in combat, kind of doing what I got to do. You know what I mean? And I was watching these guys work, and I was like I saw some like special forces guys, like we need to flush this guy with this gun, take this gun, blast that one, take this gun out, shoot this. And they were just like operating the guns like they've done this like 1,000 times. And I thought that was very impressive the way they were doing it. So that I would say that was the most thing. But I didn't work with any tier one operators besides guys that were, they came back to the special forces, ODAs, normal tier two groups. And, I saw some cool stuff. There were CIA guys out there. It was kind of wide open to see who was on the ground doing. But one thing I did realize is like, even in these big operations, everybody was working together. We had MARSOC guys, we had Navy attached to the ODA, we had Navy EOD guys, we had the Green Berets, it was just like everybody worked together on the missions. It's like just funny, everybody goes to all these different training groups and stuff like that. When they get deployed, everybody's on the same team working together to do the mission. So I thought that Air Force guys, it was just cool. It was definitely an experience.
When you have all those guys from different units, like how often do people butt heads? Like you're in a high stress environment, bullets are flying, like is there a lot of conflict or no?
Not at my level. I didn't see anything, you know what I mean? Like you knew who was the bosses over there, the guys who had the experience, like the team sergeants. Like I was very impressed with the ODA team sergeants. They ran the teams. It wasn't like, I think in the Air Force we're a little bit different. We kind of respect the officers run the team a little bit more than like the enlisted guys do. And it was, I think the Army was completely different. You have like some old crusty team sergeant. He was like telling the officers, like, this is what we're doing. That's what it is. So I didn't see too much of anybody really bugging him. We were all trying to get over there, getting the mission and trying to get home safe. So it worked out, for me, it worked out really, it was good. It was a good experience. Like everybody was right on. They helped me out. They taught me a lot. They made sure I was good to go. So it was good stuff.
And I want to kind of transition now into your MMA career, but tell me about the decision to leave the military and then go into MMA. What was kind of the thought process, all of that?
It was definitely a really hard decision. You know what I mean? Like once you get into the military and accepted into the combat control career field, for me, it was like it's a brotherhood for sure. And I love all those dudes. I want to go see them. I still talk to my combat controller friends. Like there's a bond I definitely have that I didn't realize I had while I was in until you leave and you start getting incorporating into like normal society. And you're like, oh man, I was like a tier above normal people. You know what I mean? So it was hard for me to leave, but I'm super happy I did. I definitely took a big giant gamble with this fighting thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was an amateur. Like I had no professional fights when I left the military. I did martial arts my entire life. I did a couple amateur fights while I was in right near the end of my military career. But to make the choice to be like, all right, I'm going to get out and move home and try to do this full time was definitely a big gamble. A lot of stress. Transitioning out was real hard. Just stressful and hard on me, especially right after coming back from my first deployment. So I deployed. I had like a year, and then I got out of the military. So it was definitely a stressful time in my life. I remember that for sure.